Now we have come to our second keynote by the founder of Analyst, Mr. Matt Dalio. Our second keynote will be introduced by CEO and Head of Investment Banking at Revere Securities, Dr. Dajiang Guo. He is the CEO and Head of Investment Banking at Revere Securities, where he oversees the firm's investment banking, equity, capital market, and sales and trading activities. Before joining Revere, he was a partner at Tiger Securities and China Bridge Capital. Over the course of his career, he served as a CEO of CITIC Securities International USA, COO of CITIC Investment Banking Division, head of CITIC Strategy and Planning, and in various executive roles at CICC Hong Kong and US. So to keep it short, let's welcome Dr. Dajiang.
Thank you, Yawan. Thank you for your introduction. It's a great honor for me to introduce Matt Dalio. And Matt is the founder of Endless. And Matt dreams of a world in which every child has the resource to shape their own technology world. So he founded Endless, which aims to provide universal access to technology and equal opportunities to succeed in the digital world by tackling three key challenges. First, Endless is harnessing the power of a modern game to introduce youth to 21st century skills like coding and design. Second, it is addressing the internet gap by creating technology that enable youth anywhere to have access to basic education resource. And lastly, Endless is building a pay-as-you-go laptop program, making access to computer cheaper than a data plan. And another significant part I would like to introduce Matt is he founded a China Care Foundation at the age of 16. In China, that's called a Chunhui Boai program. And we offering the children a bright future. For that work, Matt is honored as one of Oprah Winfrey's People Changing the Life of Children Around the World, as one of the Teen People's 20 teen who will change the world. And he is also the youngest recipient of the Fulbright Award. So all of this was motivated by he living a Chinese family in Beijing when he was the age of 11. And I think that was mentioned also by Dalio's book about that. By that, also he's graduated from Harvard College in the year 2006, and also from Stanford Business School at year 2012. So welcome, Matt Dalio. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dajiang. So this morning I woke up at 4 a.m. with my son sick, and I couldn't get back to sleep, and I went and I did Qigong, as I often do. And I realized as I was doing the Qigong, this was a symbolic moment of the ways in which China has woven its way into who I am, the core of my daily routines and habits, and the passions that I have today. And so I'd like to, I've been asked to share my life story, and so I'd like to walk you through my journey to finding passion, and through that, hopefully, there will be something for you all to learn from. So I hope you can see my screen. I assume you can see that now. Is that right? Okay, I'll continue.
Yes, we can see it. Yeah, thank you.
So that little guy down the bottom left is me as a 3-year-old on my very first trip to China. And the very first time that my dad went to China actually was the year that I was born, and he went there just out of a love for China. He had always had this curiosity, and so people had invited him. CITIC actually invited him to go, and they were just starting to open up new markets. They were setting up the stock market, and so he went there and fell in love with it. And so a few years later, when I was 3 years old in this trip, we were invited as a family to come and spend a summer in Beijing and then travel around. And honestly, the few things I remember about it are first, a bike accident that I had. I remember running around palaces. I remember that I would only eat dumplings and eggs. which is ironic because now my favorite food is Chinese, and I always joke that half the reason I want to go, that I love China so much, is because I want to go eat the food. And yet with that start began the first domino that changed the rest of my life. A few years later, I went back to China again with my dad, and then I went again, and then I went again. And when I was 9 years old, my dad offered to have me live in China for a year with a Chinese family. My parents spoke to a psychologist. They said that was crazy, that we had to wait 2 years. And so at 11 years old, I actually did go. And I went in part because, you know, when I went with my dad on these trips, I would go to the to the Great Wall. I would go to these, you know, wonderful grand banquets, and then one year we met my headmaster of Shijiahutong Xiaoxue, who my dad is speaking with right there. And the next thing you knew, I was one of these students. And so I went as a 6th grader in 1996 to 石家胡同小学。我的中文现在很差，所以我会说一点，但是我大部分都忘了，但是我一年就这样中文了。So I've now forgotten so much of it that I'll continue in English. But this was my life. And that was me in my class. That was me sitting in the front left there. And it was the best year of my life. I literally think it was the best year of my life. And it was because of the love that I had. So for example, Zhang Laoshi, who's sitting right behind me, I would go into her office, and I would spend hours in there, and I'd tell her which girl I had a crush on, and I'd go and I'd build little contraptions, and I'd put ping pong balls down them, they'd flow down. And I felt so loved and so welcome. And so as I was going through old photos of myself, I saw how many of these photos, if you could see on the right-hand side of the screen, I'm smiling, I'm laughing, I'm so joyful, because I felt so much love from so many people. So for example, Xiong Tao to my left was my best friend. I spent, just, you know, practically every waking minute with him. We would go and adventure. And I had a whole bunch of these friends. And, you know, again, here, another picture of me just radiant and smiling. And the warmth that I felt was really, it was at the core. It was such a feeling of home. So a story that this brings to mind, we went to a hot spring with my shushu, who I lived with Gu Ai and my shushu, were the two elderly couple that I lived with, who were so loving. And my shushu was very tough. He had been through war. He would do squats, and he would sit there bouncing around for an hour and show me that he could do more push-ups than me. And I remember going to these hot springs, and we got in the cold shower, and the showers were very, very cold. And I was, you know, jumping in and jumping out, and he was there fully happy, you know, strong, showing how strong he was. And then I realized that afterwards that he'd been playing a trick on me, and he had hot water, and I hadn't figured out how to turn on the hot water. I had cold water. And that was that kind of joking, that kind of, you know, happiness. And for me, the most symbolic moment that stands out was Christmas. I remember there was no Christmas tree basically to be found. There was no Christmas anything in all of Beijing. I had my bike, and this was back in the days of the bike culture, where you could find hundreds of bikes lined up. And I took my bike with Xiong Tao, and we went biking around looking for Christmas, any kind of decorations. It took us 3 days to find them. And when we finally found them, we decorated this little tree. We had the string lights, and we had all of my friends from China. These were the closest ones who were there. And it was everyone brought their own food. So we had kind of a big collection, smorgasbord of Chinese food. Everyone knew my favorite food. So they each made their favorite, you know, their dish that they knew was my favorite dish. And then that night we put on American music. it's funny, while I fell in love with China, it was the most patriotic I'd ever been. I would go biking down the hutongs, singing, American national anthem. And I was so excited to share Christmas with everyone. And we turned out the lights, and we had just the little Christmas lights with strobe lights, and we danced until the wee hours of the night. And I just remember feeling so at home. To spend Christmas as an 11-year-old away from home is a hard thing, and yet it may have been the best Christmas of my life. And so I look at each of the people here, Guai, who's sitting right behind me, who's standing behind me, Mai Shushu, who's over to the right. I mean, these are family. Guai is like a mother to me. And so it's with this that I found really a part of me that, I often say, like, I became part Chinese, but really the way that I put it is if you were to take all of the things that were China and all the rest of the story that I'll describe as I go through the rest of this with China Care and all of the layers, and you were to mix it all together and now melt it all out, I wouldn't be recognizable. I would have holes all throughout me. You wouldn't be able to, like, I don't know who I am without this moment and all of the moments around it. So when I said farewell, I still remember that saying 做校长老师们同学们大家好. When I spoke at this speech, saying farewell, I went home and I went back to my town in Greenwich, Connecticut, a very pretty place. And actually, the culture shock was so much more coming home than it was going, because when I went, I knew that I was up for a challenge. I knew it would be different. I remember Guai was upset because she didn't want me to catch a cold, and I was insistent that I had to sleep on the hard wood, and because most Chinese at the time didn't sleep on mattresses was my logic, and so I'm gonna throw the mattress off and I'm gonna sleep on the hardwood. And every morning she'd wake up and saying, you're gonna catch a cold, but I wanted the challenge. And when I came home, everything felt so fancy and polished. There was so much money, but there was honestly so much less soul than what I had experienced in my year in China. And a few years passed, and I hadn't had a reason to go until I encountered a family friend who had adopted a girl from China, and she was telling me about it. And I was looking to do an Eagle Scout project. I was looking to get into college, quite frankly, and I was looking to do something that would give me an excuse to go back and something that would give me a way to give back. And so I went to China and I spent a summer in an orphanage. And in this orphanage, I discovered a version of, I met children with hydrocephalus who have fluid filling their brains. I met children with cleft lip who, for a tiny surgery, a $300 surgery, that their parents, as poor farmers, could not provide for their children, would have to abandon their children in the hopes that their children could have a better life. And so suddenly this reality of hardship, of challenges, that the world is not always a clean and fancy and pretty place, that so much of it is faced with real stark challenges, faced me. And at the same time, I also discovered that for $300, I could give this child a surgery. For $3,000, I could give a child who needed to have open heart surgery, I could give that child a surgery and make them healthy, literally saving their lives. And not only would I save their lives, but now that they're healthy, they could then be up for adoption. And now all of a sudden they had families. So the following year, I went back. I had spent the year trying to raise money from anyone who would. I go knock on doors and talk to all my family friends. And I tried to raise as much money as I could to do as many surgeries as possible and place as many kids in foster families as possible. And then I met this girl. She was in the Tianjin orphanage. And when we walked in, she was like instant brightness. I mean, incredible, radiant personality. And she had what they call giant hairy nevus, black hairy skin down her face. And when we left that room, everyone I was with asked, wow, tell me about that girl, because she was so special, so bright. And it turned out that there was a family in China that was looking to adopt a Chinese girl, adopt her specifically. When they had gone to adopt her sister beforehand, they saw her, fell in love with her, and in the process, they then decided, we've got to adopt her, but they didn't have the $3,000 that it would take to fly to China and pick her up and fly her home. So we started a financial aid program. And this little girl, Xiayan, is now little Gracie Lycopoulos in Wisconsin. I was on the phone with her 2 months ago. She's doing great. She's got a job. She's got a job while she's about to graduate from school. She's just a vibrant person now as an adult. We discovered we could renovate orphanages. We started a whole program to bring American youth to China and start to make sure that there was this continuity, this bridging of cultures. And so we found 80 different colleges with hundreds of kids who wanted to do what I was able to do in terms of changing kids' lives in China. And this was just one group from one of the groups, from one of the schools that went to China. There's one last story in China Care I want to tell, because I think it's just so poetic about the difference that one life can make. This little girl was in the Baotou orphanage, and we were setting up a Baotou children's home at the time, and she had spina bifida. And spina bifida means you have a small, very delicate sac at the base of your spine. And the person that I was with told me she'll be dead in 2 weeks. And I asked, what do you mean? Look, she's so healthy. And he says, well, in 2 weeks, the little sac will get punctured. It will get infected, and she'll die of an infection. And so I asked, is there anything that we can do? And to do anything would have required, because she couldn't fly, finding someone to put her on a train and carry her for a 12-hour train ride back to Beijing. It would have required special approvals. And so we sat there wondering for 2 days, would we be able to save this little girl's life? And the answer was yes. We were able to bring her to Beijing, give her a surgery, and actually get her adopted into a family in Nebraska, where she's now grown up and is, graduated from college. So that was my childhood. I did that for 10 years, and then found an amazing partner in Jenny Bowen from One Sky, where we were able to merge all of our programs into One Sky, which is now Chunhui in China. So the programs live on. The China Care Children's Home lives on. The mission lives on. But what lived on in me was the need for purpose. And so I want to spend just a few minutes talking about what I discovered in my life and how I took the purpose that I learned I needed to have when I was young and found it in my work today. I graduated from school, and I put this picture here. It's not a picture of me, but it's a picture of how I felt, which was when I graduated from school, I went into work for real estate private equity, and I didn't like it. And then I went to work for a real estate development company, and I felt lost because it didn't have the same meaning that I had come to just assume life, of course, must have. And so I went to business school, and I had an insight that brought color back into my life. And it was on a trip to India, where I realized that smartphones, this was in 2010, when I was going through old pictures and taking pictures of all the phones everyone had feature phones. Nobody in emerging markets had smartphones. And yet smartphones, it was obvious the price was going to come down and they would be in the hands of billions of people, but computers wouldn't. And so while smartphones were destiny, I believed that you could get computers into the hands of billions of people, that computers are still today the device that you use to work and study. And so I felt like the spirit got into me and I needed to make this happen. Billions of people waiting for this to happen. And so I went to China, I went to India, Bangladesh, Thailand, all sorts of different countries to research whether this idea made sense or not. And I took this picture there, and it was just so symbolic of like this little girl needed education. She needed hope. She needed opportunity. And it was going to be technology that did that, that gave that to her. And so here is a very quick summary of the two main pillars that sent me on my way to the third pillar of my life, which is where I'm spending most of my time today. For limited time, I'll just describe very briefly. With device access, if you can finance a device, you can make a computer affordable to billions of people. The problem is that banks won't lend them money to finance them. So if you treat them like phones where you can top up the payments and they unlock, and if you don't pay, then they lock, now it means all of a sudden people pay, which means all of a sudden you can lend to people who normally wouldn't be creditworthy. So basically, if you treat a computer like a phone where you prepay, now all of a sudden billions more people can afford the monthly cost of a computer. And for those who don't have internet, which is amazing, we think everyone has internet, and that's not true. 47% of the planet does not have internet today. And those who do, they're defined as internet if they can get on the internet once a month. So many people can't afford fast or fully available internet. And so the insight we had along the way was a very simple insight, which I could talk for hours about, but someone gave me a CD when I was traveling and said, put this inside. And I asked what's inside of the CD? And their answer was Wikipedia. And I was shocked to realize that you can put basically the entirety of Wikipedia into a few gigabytes. You can put Khan Academy, you can put an entire year's educational curriculum inside of a device. In fact, on a $100 hard drive, you can put millions of web pages. And the moment people plug into the internet, you refresh it all so that when they go home, they still have it. The third insight that I had in doing that was actually a pair of insights. The first was, it was all really motivated by a question, which is how do you teach the skills that will get people jobs? Because if they have a computer and they have internet access and they have all the educational content, they still won't necessarily have the skills that will get them a job. But if you can teach them, for example, to code, it doesn't matter where they are, they will learn, they will be able to get a job. And so the two insights that we had, the first was every time we would put games in front of kids, they'd play the games, even if they were math games. So we'd walk into classrooms and we'd see rooms full of kids shouting numbers at each other, basically doing their multiplication tables really, really excitedly. Why? Because it was in a game. And the second insight was that we have this amazing team of engineers, some of the best Linux engineers in the world, because we had to build an entire operating system and we had to hire some of the best Linux engineers in the world to do that. And I was just fascinated. How did you learn to code? Because like to be that good, I was just curious. And the answer, it turns out, was the same across almost all of them. It was the same for Elon Musk. It was the same for Mark Zuckerberg. Can anybody guess what that is? How they learned? The answer was, as a kid, I loved video games, and I discovered that I could hack my games. It was games that was the hook to turn almost everyone who was an engineer into an engineer and set them on their journey. And so that sent me on a journey of using games to teach. And so what we have built is a game studio that the trick of the game studio is that the youth are the game studio. They are the ones building the games. Why? Because if you can build a game, you can build software. And if you can build one kind of software, you can build any kind of software. And games are vastly multidisciplinary. It's not just about code. It's about digital art, like backgrounds like this. It's about project management. It's about 3D modeling. It's about learning to take it to market. It's really about teaching entrepreneurship in a small little thing that every kid is excited about. Why games? Because every kid, the average kid, spends 10,000 hours playing video games by the time they graduate from school. And if you can use that engagement, that time productively, and make it so that this is available to anyone in the world to access, we believe that we have a way to teach millions of kids, potentially billions of kids. That's my dream. My dream is every kid in the world has access to the skills and the tools to go live a better life. If you can use games, the addictive nature, wherever they are, to learn how to build little video games together, and you could scaffold people on that journey, we believe you can teach them all. And if you can solve device and internet access the way that we can, we believe you can then make that available truly to anybody. So I have one last thing as an example that I would love your feedback on. And so I'm going to send out a link here. But here's my dad and I as kids in China, when I was a kid in China. And we're thinking about working on a collaborative project. And the game will be an investing game. For those of you who know the name Ray Dalio and Bridgewater, my dad is Ray. And his dream is really just at this point of his life to teach everybody the skills that he's learned throughout the course of his life. And so we're thinking about collaborating on a video game where you can go and basically play the market, simulate it across history, across time, across different markets. And he'll teach you how to invest. He'll teach you the basics of the principles of investing. He'll be putting out a book that would go alongside it. So he's planning on publishing that book anyway. And the idea would be the book and the game go together. And so what I'd like to do is send out a link for anybody who's interested in this. If you want to keep updated on it, please put your name in here and here, there's the link. And give us your feedback. I've got some questions in there for you as well. And ultimately, the idea actually is that the kids get to build the games with my dad. And so you'd actually, if you're interested, be able to participate in the process of building the game with him and seeing how it evolves and helping to give the sort of feedback that shapes it into something great. So with that said, and with about a minute to spare, I just want to come back to this. It brings me such sadness to see the relationship right now politically between two nations, between China and the United States. And then I look at this picture and I think of all of the love. I look at Guai and that smile. And I think almost everyone in this photo, the whole older generation, they're almost all gone. And if there were one legacy that I could leave behind for them, it is to serve as a bridge between these two nations that I love so much. And so it's because of that, when I was asked to speak, that I immediately jumped forward, that if I could get the opportunity to tell this story of two peoples who really have so much in common, so much more in common than not, and tell my story of how this shaped me and made me who I am. Again, I am unrecognizable without it. I don't know who I am without it. That at the very least, that I can do that to make them proud. And so with that said, thank you for listening to my story. And I hope that you will also do your parts to bring these two countries closer together. And also, I will say the last thing is to find your purpose. I gave a graduation speech at my alma mater recently, and I had 3 pieces of advice about the 3 most important decisions you'll ever make: who you marry, who your friends are, and what you do. And on what you do, the most important thing is to find people who will be benefited by what you do, people whose lives you can change. If you're ever wondering what the next step in your life should be, and you're looking at an opportunity where one can change a life, or where you can heal someone's brokenness, you will probably find passion in that. So with that, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much. Yeah, really appreciate. I think that we can work together. And also, I think that the relation between US and China can be improved by doing the people contact. And I think that you are the greater bridge between the US and China. So thank you for your great work, and wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Dajiang, for having me. Okay, goodbye.
Okay, I think we conclude this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dajiang and Matt, for giving us a very warm and touching keynote for today. Matt has done a great charity work and technology education work in China. Hope we could visit 春晖博爱基金 in Beijing someday.